This is Adam Novak, and this is my presentation, which I've entitled Persona, Finding Myself on the 10 Faces of Innovation. The 10 Faces of Innovation is a book by Kelly that describes the purpose of the 10 Faces of Innovation as being important within creative thinking and in organizations instead of the devil's advocate or brainstorming. These personas bring its own lever, its own tools, its own point of view to the teams who deliver innovative, great things. The 10 personas are really organized into three major categories. One is the learners, who are the constant intellectual growth, organizers who navigate through complex organizations in order to get things done, and the builders who deliver in the midst of the action. Within the learners, there's the anthropologist, the cross-pollinator, the experimenter. I kind of called them in different terms, gorillas in the mist, kind of like going into um, different environments and looking at what is going on and studying that. The cross-pollinator is connecting dots throughout the organization, bringing disparate areas together, and the experimenter does discovery through testing. The organizers have the hurdler who leaps over obstacles to push things to get them done, the director who sees the big picture and looks at all the different areas and how the end should look, and the collaborator who breaks down silos to help collaborate between different areas. The builders have the experience architect who delivers moments to remember, the set designer who helps set the stage, sets the experience, and the caregiver who brings empathetic strength to listen, to understand, to get people's points of view. And finally, the storyteller. Once upon a time, they have the story of how things should work and how they gather momentum by helping people understand through their stories. Myself, I have spent 20 years in a large healthcare payer provider organization. My current role is actually very apt to use many of the different innovative techniques that I've talked about in the book. Our group focuses on changing individual consumer behavior to help people to get to the right place for their medical care. And I will give an example of that. I did study creativity and innovation. I consider myself a design thinker. I am collaborative, but I deliver. And often I've been called a Swiss Army knife. I am an INFJ. I've discussed this before. So I have an ambivert nature in my job, but I am somewhat introverted, very introverted in my personal life. I am a leader. I think it's important to notate that I have little interest in managing people. So in the past several years, as I've had to work through big complex problems and big complex initiatives, I've had to develop skills such as influencing without authority, collaboration, etc. Um, I have multiple of the different personalities that are notated in the 10 personalities of innovation, the 10 faces of innovation. And I'm going to lead through one of my current examples, which is my current challenge is regarding why do customers choose the emergency room for non-emergency services, such as a rash, a strain, a some cold or flu symptoms, but not like a major trauma. The ER is really expensive both to the customer and to the company. You pay a lot more to go to the ER than you would, let's say, a PCP or an urgent care center. You expose yourself to infections that come in the hospital and for people that are coming into the ER that might have something. And there's longer wait times and sometimes a very traumatic, somewhat upsetting experience, especially if you bring children into the emergency center. Um, these are reasons why we have a high rate of individuals going to the emergency room. And one of the things that I'm challenged with is looking at different options to help change that behavior and understand and get people to choose a different area for their care. Before I talk about the 10 phases of innovation, though, I should really talk about how our department leverages what we call our process from understanding through implementation. We have a multi-staged process that does happen in an agile fashion, and it does happen iteratively. So a lot of these happen conjointly. We deliver what we do in a staged fashion and are constantly going back and looking at these different pieces. So there's mobilize, understand, design, implement, measure and manage, and educate. And this is how mobilizing a team, understanding the situation, designing the solution, implementing it, educating our partners and those who are going to be dealing with the change, and then measure and managing how we're doing. And this constantly goes in a circle as we do different pieces of this. So when I looked at this in conjunction with my particular scenario, I kind of called out that within my scenario and within my job, I actually pull out a lot of the personas as I go through the process of putting this all together. So I wanted to kind of call out during our mobilize and understand phase, there's data gathering, there's focus groups and surveys. We actually visit, we observe, we talk to people who are going through the processes. And you can see this really calls out pieces of the director, where data needs to tell a story and understand the full picture. The caregiver is where I'm really listening with empathy, and empathy is a big piece of understanding the behavior of different individuals, putting ourselves in their shoes. And we also kind of act as that gorillas in the mist, where we go out, we watch, we observe, we walk through the process that one of our consumers are actually going to. Designing and implementing has multiple personas as well. We do look not just at a mass of one size fits all, but we really try and look at the individual personas that we can and group them together and develop interventions and put ourselves into the story that we're designing and say, if I were this individual, these are the steps I would take, and this is the story that I would want to tell. Often we work with other partners, other departments, and this is our cross-pollinator, sprinkling this innovation, sprinkling these ideas through those different areas. In a large, complex organization, you can imagine as we implement, especially change or things that are new, we often have to push through old time processes. A lot of individuals who don't think that this is perhaps the best thing to do because it is new. So that's where our hurdler persona comes in. And the set designer is really what I align to. A lot of what we do is all about the experience of the user, the experience of the consumer. Even looking at when you walk in the front door of somewhere, or you have a phone call, or you have a flyer or something, what exactly should that all look like? And that is where I called out the set designer. Measuring, managing, and educating, collaborating is where we get the word out with our partners. We get the word out with anyone who will be touching that member so they understand what is going on, how that individual and what the changes are for them. The experimenter, we do measure our success and improvement by putting our interventions and our functionality out in a staged fashion, testing it out, perhaps testing it just on a small group, and then slowly understanding, sometimes quickly understanding how it is working, making changes, redoing it. That's our experimenter persona. And finally, how can this improve is something we constantly look at. where we're looking at the full experience and are trying to architect, like the experience architect, how will the full end-to-end experience of that user, kind of aligning with the set designer, but even down to the process, the things that we need to do internal, how do we kind of design and architect out that new experience? Did it work? Did it not work? And these things all work together as we go through our different processes. And as you can see, there are multiple times where we kind of are um, almost like Sybil, where we have multiple personalities and we have multiple situations where we call out different pieces of the individual personas. We've found that by putting on these different personas hats and not just being one, but having different pieces of each of them in our process and in the work we do, helps us become much more successful. So finally, the question that I really ended with was looking at these different personas. Does it take a village to innovate, or do these archetypes and these personas become just different pieces of the new way of looking at human-centered situations? We do consider ourselves a systems thinking, a human-centered design, a human-centered implementation lab. And these are things that each of these different personas are actually doing. One thing that the book called out is this is much different than the old standard of someone saying, can I play the devil's advocate? Because by doing these different personas, we kind of are getting rid of that old time devil's advocate. Thank you.